Good day, everyone, and welcome back in. This is episode number 2 of our Warhammer Junkyard scene, and, well, I've given it a name. This is going to be Trudy's Junkyard for, well, no apparent reason. I just thought Trudy seemed like a rough and tumble name for a junkyard lady. So, in this episode, we will start working on the base because we need to get that layout figured out. And then we'll also do, well, quite a bit of painting here. This is going to be one of those longer, little bit more in-depth episodes where we're going to do a lot of painting on the buildings. So stay tuned for all of that. There's a lot to come, so let's get started. Well, let's start off with the base. And for that, if you recall from the last episode, that little cutting board that I like to use, well, and it's about the right shape and size. Well, guess what the dimensions are for the base for this. And so I went ahead and cut that out of some insulation foam. And then behind, on the rear side of this scene, I've decided let's make that into some sort of a very large, imposing canyon sort of wall. This will be kind of a wasteland type of scene, a desolate desert scene, but some very dramatic, like I said, cliffs and wallscapes. So I start just merrily cutting out some foam, using the foam cutter here, and it's kind of a handy tool. I'm still working on figuring out how to use it to the best, but it's making some pretty neat shapes and cuts here, and I'm enjoying that, so hopefully it works out okay. So let's lay out the base here. Let's see what it's going to look like. Got some different elevations there. Got the wallscape coming back to the sides there. Oh, that's good. Nice. I like that dramatic piece on the right. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And here are the buildings that we put together in the last episode. Just a rough layout here, but I think this is going to work. Keep in mind there'll be a lot of junk and things like that in the foreground, plus my little people. While I have everything laid out, let's go ahead and just glue everything down. A little bit of white glue. Some toothpicks just to hold everything in place, keep everything down nice and flat. Squirt, squirt, squirt. There we go. Poke those in there. And this front section will be the last section here. I'll actually put a little side section off to the right side too a little bit later on. As you know, when I work on my bases and such, it's always just kind of a organic process, just kind of lives and add things as they seem fit along the way. Decided to go ahead and carve in a little bit of sculpture along the sides of some of these elevations. Keep in mind that these little figures, they're 28 millimeters, so it's more or less like 1/48 scale, something like that. Carved in just a few, I guess we'll call these steps, just to help these guys get up and down a little bit. Just add a little bit of interest here and there. And then on that one side piece that I was talking about, well, that's got the skinny section in the middle. I'm afraid that's just going to snap off at some point. So I cut a little trough in there, and I've got a piece of square brass tubing there. And so I'm just going to drop that into that little trough, and that'll give it a little bit of rigidity so this thing doesn't just break off next time I bump into it. And just cover it back up with a little bit of spackling paste, and we should be good to go here. Just a brief pause in the conversation here to say thank you to my Patreons. If you like this channel and like to support it further, well, the link for Patreon is in the description below. And over there, we're running a little contest right now where one of the Patreons will be selecting the paint scheme for an upcoming project, and they will receive a prize of a brand new kit. So if this sounds good to you, well, please join up. Okay, here we go for the main show. This is what everybody comes in to see, the painting part where we put all the fancy, pretty colors on everything. Kind of worked my way through a different process here, and it evolves between building 1 and building 2 because I decided to make my life easier. But I start off with deciding, well, let's paint this more or less, well, basically all by hand after the base coat. So I give it a base coat of dark color here, and this is a dark grimy gray color, grimy brown color. And then I'll give it zenithal highlights. So I'm almost following the idea of painting figures when you use the airbrush to give the dark shadows and then the zenithal highlights from the top. Because I thought, well, with all these details that I have all over this model, I'm just going to have to hand paint it mostly anyway, so I might as well just hand paint the entire thing. In retrospect, and you'll see that, maybe not, certainly wasn't the easiest process, and it wasn't maybe the best idea. Here are the highlights coming along, a light shade of gray after the brown tone, and then this nice light yellow just to bring out those high point and details along the edges. And then, here we go, this is the brush painting. And acrylic paints, well, they have their own peculiarities, and they're great for brush painting, you know, say, oh, I don't know, figures where you have small spaces, but over large surfaces like this, it takes a lot of layers of paint in order to get good coverage. And I guess I knew that going in, but I wasn't quite prepared for how much. But I'm using a little bit of sponge here just to add a little bit of surface details to it, because I just want to add depth. So a little bit of light colors and a little bit of dark colors, and those will be lower level chipping as well. And then I continue on my way of starting to paint. I want to bring bright colors into this scene, so it's not all going to be very drab. It's actually going to be a very colorful scene. So I've got a nice burnt orange color for the top level there. And this is where I decide, you know what, I need to unify these colors a little bit better, get some better coverage. And so I brought out the airbrush and just very lightly gave an overcoat over everything. I didn't want to cover up all my previous work because there is some nice detail in there, the early stages of scratching and chipping and things like that. But this helps unify the surfaces and gives it a better overall appearance. And then with that, now we can start back with the brush painting. And this is just bringing out all those details, because there's no way, I'm not going to mask all this. I'm not that crazy. So it's just detail painting and just adding color here and there, rusting and chipping here and there. And if you like doing chips and if you like doing rust, these are the types of scenes and models for you, because by golly, we're going to add a lot of them to this. And luckily, you know, when you have a wasteland and a abandoned or a junkyard and things like that, well, you know, who's to say it's wrong? There's never too many chips and scratches and rust and wear, right? Generally start off with a darker color, a darker tone, and then add a lighter color over the top. And using acrylics, yep, you can do all sorts of streaking and even fading with those. You just have to be a little bit careful. You don't have to be super fast, but just work quickly. Have water nearby, so you can see I'm making this scratch here. Kind of went off the rails a little bit, kind of my lines there. But I can clean it up a little bit, blend it out, and I can even draw it down a little bit. There you go. And add a little bit of staining coming down the side there. In other areas on the model, yep, there's going to be chips, but I thought, well, let's try some different types of surfaces. So in this case, I'm chipping with a metallic surface. Actually, it's a gray color, but it looks metallic against the blue. Thought, well, maybe this is like aluminum siding that they put around the edge. And then we end up with something like this after a little while. And now let's move over to this second building. Now this is that little container building that we worked on in the last episode as well. So I learned my lessons on the first one. So we're going to change up the painting a little bit on this one. If you are enjoying the content of this channel and you haven't done so already, do me a favor and please hit that subscribe button. I really would appreciate that. Thank you. So I learned my lessons on the first one. So we're going to change up the painting a little bit on this one. Just basically giving it pre-shade with a dark gray color here. Just making sure all those places where I can't get to an airbrush or get with a paintbrush later on, at least we'll have a dark shadow to it. And then, here we go. This is the change. This is where I add the basic color with the airbrush. And I've just chosen a light green color because I think it's going to show real nicely against those bright colors of the blue and the orange of the building next to it, that will be next to it. And then the green color also allows for, the light green color allows for some really nice contrast with chipping and rust and things like that. Speaking of rust, there's a piece of plastic behind this barrel here. I just added that. And I thought, well, that will be like this steel plate, you know, just a rusty steel plate that they've added there. Like maybe there was a door there that they closed off and put this, you know, barrel of chemicals or whatever that is in front of it. So just adding a dark rust color there, just painting that in around everything. And then once I have that darker color established, then I can come back in with these lighter rust tones. So these are brighter oranges, maybe even a little bit of yellow, some lighter browns, and just kind of stipple those in over the surface. You know, no real rhyme or reason here, just kind of whatever seems to look good. But this will give it that kind of bright, newly rusted, oxidized finish. And it'll be, again, another little eye-catching piece in this scene. And well, of course, in front of that is this barrel, which I've already painted out. I've found some decals. Yep, I've been going through my decals and added those to it just to give the 205 on it. Just thought that'd give a little bit of interest and just a little bit, well, not a little bit, a lot of bit more rusting and chipping here using, again, the acrylics, just kind of tapping those into place. Yes, you can do a little bit of shading and streaking and all the things that you would do with, say, enamels or oils can be done with acrylics. So it just takes a little bit of practice. Speaking of oils, it's about right now that I decide, I've been toying with the idea of whether or not I was going to use oils on this project, and it was about right now I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and use oils because they are going to enhance the appearance overall. So this allowed me just to paint out these wooden planks on the front porch here just real quickly because I'll be able to give them the wood appearance using the oils, knowing that that's coming up. And then if you recall, two things. Well, first, I found this IL6 in the back of my truck and I broke it all up. This is the Edward kit. And secondly, when we were talking about this little container box, I said I have a different idea for the roof because we're going to take off that one piece that I'd already installed. Well, this is that new idea. I decided let's make a little sun porch overhang thingy on this using this wing section. And while I was thinking about it, it's like, oh, let's go ahead and camouflage it because, you know, why not? So a little bit of a rough camouflage in here. These are AK colors, AK real colors, and I just chose some nice and bright colors in keeping with the theme of the entire base. Well then, of course, since we ripped up this wing, you know, we've got to show some wear and tear on this as well, and this is a good chance to use a few metallic colors here, just a polished aluminum that I'm using, and just making some little chips and wear, and I'll do this throughout the entire wing just to really kind of beat this one up to heck as well. And then just like that, well, not really just like that, but here we are. We got our little final piece there. It's all done with the acrylics. Now we'll switch over to the oil paints. And as you can see, this is a really nice base to start beginning with the oils. First off, just taking some of the dark color and just running along some of those surface details that I put in there, these ribs along the edges of the container side here. And this will just start enhancing some of these shadows. Moving over to the roof section here, I'm just working my way around the model. There's no real rhyme or reason here. Just kind of started in one corner and working my way around top to bottom. But I can just stress some of this top color here, adding a little bit of these green tones. And notice the brush work here because I'm using a very dry brush. I'm tapping on and I'm going back and forth, and you can see I'm taking off a lot of paint in any thinner that's in there or any of the linseed oil, and then just tapping and blending that into the surface. And that's the way this entire model was basically done. Just a lot of kind of finding that little sweet spot with the oils and then just working them into the surface. And then once we get up to the wing up here, same idea. And again, watch the brush strokes, watch the paint. So nearly dry, taking the paint off my brush, taking any oils off my brushes, tapping it in, just blending, 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 and removing any excess paint from my brush onto that little paper towel off to the side there. And the motions are also stippling motions because we're kind of working it into the surface. We're not really drawing it down. We're not making rain marks or anything like that. Now, while the effects of the oil colors can be somewhat subtle, I think it really adds a lot to a model. For instance, look at the rooftop there, and there's a lot of different shades going on. It really moves the viewer's eyes from one location to the next, and that's kind of the goal. And as I said, we're not quite finished with that first building because, well, I hadn't even used the oils on that one. And a little bit lighter touch with the oils here because I did so much work with the acrylics that I didn't need to really do a lot of enhancing with the oils. But in terms of enhancements, let's raid the decal box and see what we can find in there. Again, let's just kind of figure out fun things we can throw onto the sides of these buildings just to give them a little bit of interest. And you know what? I like this number 2. We'll cut this out and let's see what this looks like on the side of Trudy's hangout here. Little splash in some water, of course. Let the decal do its thing. Apply it to the side. Nope, no gloss coats, nothing like that. Just apply the decal, a little bit of softener there, and we'll let that sit, and it does just fine. And this is where I really get into trouble because while rummaging through my decal box, I found these dry transfers, and I thought, oh, why not? Let's try these as well. So, for lack of a better word, I've just decided to throw junk onto the side of Trudy's home here because, well, she's a junk dealer. And so just burnishing the top of the carrier paper with the back end of my brush. And oh, this is always the scary part. Let's pull this off, see what we got. Oh, and yes, it worked. I haven't worked with these for years, so this is quite amazing. Well, this is bringing us towards the end of this episode. We made a lot of progress in this one. I was very happy that we've been able to work on that base because that was important just to make sure the layout was going to work out, and I think it's going to be fine. I think it's going to be very dramatic. And then, of course, these buildings, I think they're coming along nicely as well. A little bit of a kind of winding road on the paint work and how to approach these, but I think we've got a pretty good sense of what's going on there. We still have one more to do, the crane we still have left to do. We have also the figures to take care of, a lot of that, and then of course putting together the entire scene, finishing up the base and things like that. I want to thank you for joining me. If you haven't done so already and like this channel, please hit that subscribe button. And also, if you'd like a little bit more content and chatting and things like that, slide on over to the Patreon page. The link for that is below. Until then, well, keep on modeling, and we'll see you in the next episode. Take care, everybody.